Welcome to Passport to Everywhere with Indigare's Melissa Biggs-Bradley.
Melissa is the founder and CEO of Indigare, a travel and media company committed to inspiring and empowering people to change their lives and the world through travel, while having a positive impact on the places they visit. On the show, Melissa will transport you to dream destinations, share the latest travel news and trends, and introduce you to the most extraordinary people she has met on the road.
That's one of the main themes of our family, is stepping outside your comfort zone and trying new things and just being brave.
Follow her behind the scenes to the world's most legendary hotels and join us as she explores the future of travel.
Welcome to Passport to Everywhere.
The extraordinary family of explorers, known as the Bucket List family, has traveled to more than 90 countries. They are two very adventurous parents traveling with 3 children under the age of 10. In 2015, Jessica and Garrett G sold the majority of their belongings and embarked on an around-the-world adventure, which led to their incredible and quite unconventional family life. Through inspiring and authentic storytelling, Jessica and Garrett and their adventure-loving kids have done wonders to influence parents around the world to travel with their families. They've garnered 2.9 million followers on Instagram and have built an active YouTube community. They now even have their own production company called the Bucket List Studios, and their ventures haven't stopped. Jessica's debut book, National Geographic Bucket List Family Travel, Share the World with Your Kids on 50 Adventures of a Lifetime, was just released in February. I am thrilled to be speaking with both Jessica and Garrett today about the value in family travel and how they embrace life around the world with their 3 children.
Join Melissa on the journey. You're listening to Passport to Everywhere. Here's your host, Melissa Biggs-Bradley.
Welcome. It's so great to be with both of you. Thank you for coming on. I'd love to start with asking you where in the world you are right now.
Right now, we are home in Hawaii, and it feels good to be home. We've been traveling a ton lately, so it feels good to be home.
And so I want to get into all of your travels. I want to get into the new book, which is just gorgeous. But I'd love to start with how the two of you, I mean, one of my favorite questions to any couple I meet, how did you two meet? That's the first one. And then we'll get into some more background on the family. But I'm always dying to know. And you can each tell your own version, or you can choose one.
We met in, 2008, 7? We were missionaries for our church in Vladivostok, Russia. And on our church missions, we're LDS. And when you go on a church mission, you don't date at all. You don't really talk to members of the opposite sex. But, he was working really hard. I was working hard. And then we started dating when we got home. We both went to the same university in Utah when we finished our mission a year and a half later.
Okay. And when you started dating, were you both already passionate travelers? Did you have an idea of this dream from the beginning, or how did it come about?
I definitely grew up doing way more traveling. Jessica did a more kind of traditional, family going to Disney
My
World.
family was like a Disney World family, so that's where we went.
Whereas for my family, I traveled leaving the country quite often and traveling a bunch to Europe. But I remember our second date ever was I invited Jessica to travel from Utah to Seattle with me. And to her, she kind of thought it was kind of a crazy invite, especially for a second date. For me, it was just kind of nothing. It seemed normal. But in her mind, in her words, she said, if I go on this trip, I'm going to end up marrying you. And again, this was our second date. And I was really excited about that. So I was like, yo, let's go to Seattle then.
And you figured out on that second date that you guys could travel well together.
Yeah, we did. We traveled super well together. I mean, I definitely never had the desire to travel around the world. If you would have asked me even 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, I would love to go to Italy and do some cooking. I would love to go to Australia and maybe dive with the great white sharks. I had a very small bucket list, but I never had the inclination I want to travel around the world. That was never for me. You'll come to find out, and I talk a lot about this in my book, that Garrett is the king of extreme and I am the queen of moderation. So it's been a very, very good balance for the both of us.
Okay, that is a great balance. But then you did something kind of extreme, I think a lot of people would think, taking off around the world with 3 young kids. How did that start off?
Well, at the time it was just 2, and Garrett had been playing college soccer. He had a tech startup. I felt like there was maybe 5 years of our marriage where I was kind of just following Garrett and his dreams. And we moved to San Francisco, then we moved back to Utah, then we moved to LA, and then we moved back to, so I just kind of felt like we'd been following him. And then we kind of had this compromise where he wanted to finish his senior year of soccer at BYU. And he said, you choose what's next. And I said, I want to do a little bit of traveling. Again, me being, moderate girl over here is like, let's go hit up a couple countries. And then Garrett takes it and is like, we sell everything. We travel around the world. So a lot of times it's my ideas and then Garrett just blows them up.
So in terms of the planning, you guys decided we're going to sell everything. We're going to go around the world. Where do you start? How far in advance did you plan where you were going to go?
Originally, because when we sold everything, it was a yard sale that we did, and we sold a car, some furniture, our clothes, and anyways, that tallied up to be about $45,000. So we considered that is our travel money, and we're going to go as far as we can on the $45,000. And we agreed that, for the protection of our family, once that money is gone, then we're going to be done traveling. We're not going to like dip into our savings to keep traveling. And so I took that as a personal challenge of, I want to keep traveling for as long as possible. So let me see what kind of entrepreneurial methods I can come up with to extend that money. And that's when I started the YouTube channel, the Instagram, came up with the name, The Bucket List Family. And then Jessica was always in charge of the itinerary and actually keeping tabs on the budget. And so the initial itinerary, I think, was 6 countries.
Yeah, we each had a couple of things we wanted to do. Garrett wanted to swim with whales in Tonga. I wanted to see the lanterns in Thailand. And we wanted to do the great white sharks in Australia, which we didn't end up doing. But we kind of had those few things. And then we filled in the blanks with basically the South Pacific. New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Thailand, Tonga was kind of our first 4-month stint of traveling. And yeah, initially Garrett had created this YouTube first and foremost for family memories. And then also I think as let's see if I can turn this into a side hustle, and at the time it was 2015, travel influencer, that wasn't even a thing. So I feel like Garrett was really forward-thinking in his thought of maybe we can turn this into a profession. I will say though, his mother, he didn't mention this though, with his childhood traveling, his mom was a travel journalist. She actually wrote for travel magazines. So he had kind of seen how you can be a travel journalist writing for magazines or whatever. And he was taking that and putting it to social media.
That's amazing. Okay. And so what were some of your aha moments as you first started out, as both from an entrepreneurial perspective and as a family perspective?
I remember there just being a lot of things that when we would have these incredible experiences, like seeing the whales in Tonga or going and being in Australia, a lot of those experiences were better because we were doing it together as a family. And so that was, for me, a young dad, that made me want to keep going, not just to continue the travels and adventures, but it was that time together with my kids in such a golden age as a family. That was my motivation. It was almost in the back of my mind that if the Bucket List Family as a venture failed, then I had to go get a more standard 9-to-5 job. And so that fear is what really motivated me to make it work.
I feel like we had so many aha moments, especially in the beginning as a mom, first and foremost, packing. I the ridiculous things that I packed in the beginning, and then just realizing that less is more. In those first 3 or 4 months, I learned to love living out of a suitcase. I learned to love living with less and not being stressed out by what I was going to wear or what I needed for the day. Learning that, yes, there are diapers everywhere around the world.
You don't need a pack.
And you don't need
worth of diapers.
And yes, you can buy, spices and herbs everywhere. I literally had packed herbs and spices that I was I can't get these somewhere else. So just everywhere that we go, we had access to things, and there's babies all around the world and diapers, and you can buy all this stuff. So I quickly fell in love with a minimalistic life.
That's amazing. And what about the kids? For them, how old were the two when you first started traveling, and what were some of their biggest learnings early on?
So Manila, our second, he just turned 1, right when it was the first country he turned 1. And then Dorothy's 22 months older than him. So she was about to turn 3. So very young kids. And in retrospect, when people ask me for advice on traveling without young kids, I'm like, wow, that was hard. Like that was hard. And we just did it. There was no like, should we do this? The kids are young and it's going to be tricky. It was like let's go.
That's amazing. And so they truly grew up in some ways on the road.
100%. And actually I say like our second, I give him a lot of the credit for why we were able to travel the way we did with a 1-year-old or an 18-month-old, like that's like the danger zone. And he was such a good little boy, whereas most little rowdy boy toddlers are running around. I could say, stand here in the security line for an hour with me and he would do it. So we had a really good little boy that allowed us to continue to travel when I think a lot of parents would have been like, this is absurd traveling with a toddler. And he was amazing.
I remember in some of our early stays, we would try to find either the cheapest rental house or the cheapest hotel that we could find. And often that meant it was like our entire family in just a 1-bedroom situation. And we could give us the bed and we could like lay out a towel on the floor, like a blanket on the floor with a pillow, and they would go right to sleep, and they were just troopers along the way. So a lot of the credit is to our kids being they're very good kids.
That's amazing. And when did you start realizing that you were gaining traction with YouTube and that you were going to be able to extend from that original yard sale cash to a longer time?
Well, as Jessica said, and then early on days, it started as just more so a family journal. And so in our early videos, I would talk about like, hey, mom and dad back home, we miss you. And our next country, we're off to New Zealand. And then we started to get like a few more subscribers to our channel, but so few that I could like give them a shout out being like, hey, Jacob, welcome to our channel. You're our new subscriber this week. Like I could call people out by name because we were getting so few. And then I won't say like we never like went viral or it never just like exploded. It's always been a very slow, gradual growth, but we've kind of appreciated it and loved it that way.
I think I was really surprised when we sold everything. The plan was to come back after 4 or 5 months after the little bit of travel and to reassess. And in my brain, I was like, oh, we're going to buy a house. We'll settle down. We wanted to learn from the world. We wanted to, hopefully just broaden our perspective. So we had the goal to like take what we were learning and then figure out where we wanted to be and how that would, adapt into our lives. And I was so surprised after those first 4 months. We came back home, to see family for Christmas. And I knew Garrett would want to keep traveling. I knew that's what he would want. He's just the yes man. But I was really surprised that I was like, I love it. I want to keep going. I don't mind, living out of a suitcase. And I love this time with the kids. And so we just decided to keep going. So then from that time, so this was about 4 or 5 months in, then it became the challenge of our money's running out. How do we make it last? And I remember reaching out to one property in Thailand and asking them if they would want to work with us to host us in Thailand. And they were like, we don't even have an Instagram account. And I was like, I'll show you. I'll open one up for you. And I sat down and I helped them like start an Instagram page, like it was that early on where I'm so grateful for the handful of like properties that like took a chance on us, took a chance on like social media altogether. And a lot of them, I mentioned them in my book, which is really cool. I feel like it's just been this really nice, like full circle moment for the both of us. But yeah. And then there was probably a year or so that we just hustled, and everywhere we would go, we would try to get hosted because we didn't want to spend, our money was running out.
So there definitely was this tipping point though, that as we slowly began to grow, maybe they wouldn't host us for free, but they would just give us a discount. And then eventually, as we continued to grow and the industry as a whole continued to grow, then hotels or destinations would host us for free. And then eventually, as we got big enough, then they would start to pay us. And so it went from like, we're losing less money to we're losing no money to now we're making money. And this is turning into a profitable career for us.
That's amazing. And so how many countries have you all been to together as a family now? Have you counted?
Well, I think with the 4 of us, Callie, our youngest, came.
We were at country 50 when our third was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. When we went to Jamaica, that was country 50. And then we settled down in Utah for a few months so Jessica could have our third. And then we've continued onward, obviously, since. And so the older 2 have been to 92 countries. And because there's been some repeats, our youngest has maybe been to about 35.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. And so this led to your book, Jess, with National Geographic. And it is the National Geographic Bucket List Family Travel, Share the World with Your Kids on 50 Adventures of a Lifetime. And I love the way you organize the book in lots of different ways. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. But what was the process in writing about? Like, do you know by the time you had your third, I'm going to turn this into a book and keep chronicling? Or was there a certain point when
Actually, no, we had been approached a handful of times about writing a book, and Garrett and I, like, we're podcasters, we're going to listen to something and learn that way. And so it's not the way we consume. And then when National Geographic, we got an email one day from an editor over there, and she asked if we would ever consider writing a book. And I was like, I will, with National Geographic, 100%. And when I chatted with her, she was like, we want to make it super visual. And I was like, I love it. So then together, we came up with this plan of anything and everything you need to know about traveling with kids, and then 50 bucket list destinations to go along with it. So it came together so seamlessly and wonderfully. And it was a great process. It was a great process.
And I would imagine from the way you've organized it, that it was also fun to kind of revisit some of your travels, because you
Totally. Do you remember constantly being like, Garrett, we need to go back to New Zealand. Garrett, we need to go back to Turkey. Like, he could tell what I was writing about
Well, I
that day.
could tell which country you were currently writing about, because you'd start sending me old photos from that country, and then you'd be like, we got to go back.
That's amazing. And I love the way you organized it with a lot of practical things, like, and I'd love to hear what some of those things that were obvious to you and what you think are essential, and some of the ones that were maybe more of a surprise, but you learned are essential. I mean, like, packing is obvious, but you even talk about like dealing with flying with kids.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, I think like the packing and stuff, there's one thing that I add kind of towards the end where I talk about personality traits to cultivate with traveling, and some of the personality traits that I have had to learn and grow, and being more bold and being more outspoken and just speaking up, and all the blessings that come along with doing that. And anyway, so I think that was one of the things that I wanted to add into the book that I was proud of, and I think is really important, because it's easy to be like, oh, here's my checklist, but like, what traits do I need to like have to be a more successful and to benefit more from the travels?
And can you give some examples of those? I mean, bold you gave as one.
Yeah.
Because I completely agree with you. I think you can go out into the world with an approach that invites experiences, and you can go out and sometimes miss things because of the way you operate in the world.
100%. I love that you said that. 100%. I think another one is patience. And a lot of times America is just so right now, super fast, more. We're used to those sorts of travels. And when you go to other countries, like, you need to calm down, and you need to be a grateful consumer and be patient and just enjoy the journey and be respectful of, what to expect on travel days,
and definitely just understand that you are a guest in these countries, and kind of put yourself at the back of the line when necessary.
Yeah, there's that wonderful story about the guy in Greece who was like, sitting in a cove, drinking a glass of wine in this beautiful area under an olive tree, and the guy coming up to him and saying, whose olive trees are these? And, why aren't they all picked? And he was like, well, they're mine. And he's like, but why are you not picking all of them? People will buy olive oil. And the guy was like, well, why would I do that? And he's like, well, because then you could have a lot of money. And he was like, but what would I do with a lot of money? He's like, then you could have someone to work for you. And he's like, but then what would I do? He's like, well, then you could do whatever you want. And he's like, yeah, well, which is sitting right here having a glass of wine at sunset. So I don't need to do that.
We literally had that exact same experience. It was our very, very first stop in Tonga. We were going out on the boat with the whales, and we were about to leave, and we would go to the gym every morning. Garrett and I found this gym. It cost $1 a day, and it was the jankiest gym you've ever seen. But, we wanted to stay in shape, and we would wake up at 5 a.m., run to the gym. I think it opened at 6, and work out. And we went to this Tongan man who just sat there and played video games while he opened his gym. And we were like, hey, this is really early for us. Would you mind like opening up the gym at 12, or, when we come back from the whales? Like, that would just be really great. We'll pay you $20 a day. And he was just like, nah, Like he had zero interest. And I think the American mentality that we have is just like, are you crazy, man? Like, why would you not want that? You could do it. And then you realize like this guy is living exactly how he wants to be. And so that was a really good lesson early on. And I'm so glad we learned that lesson of like, the way we live here isn't right.
What we think might be the best, what is
Yeah.
our dreams, doesn't necessarily mean the same for everyone. And I mean, and that became the beauty of traveling from different culture to culture, is just seeing what do you find joy in, where do you find your peace and your love, and then, you know, sometimes bringing that into our lives and then sometimes not.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Okay, so having done all of the traveling that you've done with your children, I'd love to hear what you think are some of the places, and you do this beautifully in the book in terms of breaking it down into, you know, really young kids, older kids. But can you give some examples from the book of, you know, like, for example, what is a great place when your kids are really young to do a bucket list type of adventure?
Yeah, I do think when some of our friends will hit us up and be like, we want to leave the country, but we have our young kids and this is our first time, where would you recommend? And we love kind of like asking them whatever questions. Are you looking for something more tropical or something more mountainous, whatever? One that comes to my mind is Belize, because there's a lot of direct flights from the US to Belize. You can use the US dollar, clean drinking water. They speak English. And so it's kind of a good first step into somebody wanting to leave the country for the first time.
If you haven't traveled internationally, we think Belize is a really great starter.
For those
Yeah.
families that are more adventurous and wanting to go bigger, we like to base a lot of our family travels around wildlife, just because it brings such an exciting element, especially for young kids. And so whether that was, you know, going to Australia so that we could like hop amongst the kangaroos there, or going to Africa and showing them like they're learning what sound does an elephant make or what sound does a hippo make, but they're learning it from like witnessing the animals there in their natural habitat. Really special opportunities.
Amazing. And so, I mean, I love Africa and have been able to bring my kids, but not when they were as young. When you did you encounter certain issues because the kids were so young? I know a lot of camps don't want really young kids.
Definitely. A lot of camps just won't even take kids. I mean, and some of them won't even take, 12-year-olds. So you just got to do your research on where you're going. We have a lodge that we've gone to time and time again, and they take kids and babies. And, we brought Callie when he was 5 months old. He had a car seat and it was just right in the middle of the safari Jeep, and he slept. And there were 1 or 2 times where he would start to make a fuss and there was a lion nearby, and then we just got out of there, so.
Or you started nursing it.
Or I would just nurse it, like we have some really great memories, but we're always just doing our best to be as safe as possible, but we take our kids on a lot of high adventure that maybe others wouldn't.
Well, you have to do what's right for your family. And I think that's what you pointed out, Garrett, like asking questions. There's no one size fits all for families and travel at all, but you can just give inspiration, I think. So what about when the kids get a little bit older? What are some of the places that you've had amazing experiences?
I don't know why I'm actually thinking a lot of like stateside destinations. I loved Alaska. Also for the wildlife and going to see the bears and stuff, but for the fishing and taking kids fishing, also taking your kids fishing and knowing that they will catch a fish is like, like if you can go to Alaska in that July, August time period where it's just beautiful, it's just endless outdoors goodness. I also feel like Alaska feels, I don't want to say foreign because it's clearly the United States, but like it just feels different than the mainland. I mean, it's kind of the same as Hawaii, but it is so stunning everywhere you go. And to hear how people live half the year when it's freezing cold and the lights are off, and the sun never comes up, like I really appreciated our time there. And I think that's good for kids that are a little bit older.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now that your kids are a little bit older, I am curious, how do you guys as a family, because I certainly experienced this with my own kids, at a certain point, they start to have a say and they start to want to influence the decision.
Well, and I realized that this was the first summer that our kids are like, so what's the plan? And I'm like, oh, you're not just like along for the ride. And I'm having to like explain my like travel decisions. So yeah, we are getting to the stage where they really, want to have a say in where we go. And I know in the near future, it will be a lot more kid planning and where do the kids want to go. Dorothy, she says her favorite country is Japan. It was like our 10th country and we haven't been back since 2016, but Dorothy's itching to go back to Japan and she will be thrilled when that happens.
Amazing.
This is Passport to Everywhere. We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome to Passport to Everywhere. I'm Melissa Biggs Bradley, your host, and today we're exploring family travel with the Bucket List family, one of the most adventurous families in the world. Jessica, who just released her first book with National Geographic, and Garrett G. join me to discuss all things family travel. Stay tuned for my Indagari Insight, where I'll share some of Indagari's favorite family travel destinations.
Passport to Everywhere with Melissa Biggs Bradley continues. Listen to new episodes every Thursday on all podcast platforms.
And what about tricks for plane rides? Do you have any?
One thing that I think Jessica's always done very well from the beginning, that I think is like a lesson for the entire world, whether you have kids or not. I think it used to be a very magical experience to do air travel. Like if you think of like the golden era of travel, like it was something people would get dressed up for. And it was a special occasion to go on an airplane. And now it's like a dreaded, like, oh, I've got a flight, whether it's long or short, like people just hate the air travel experience. And so we've done, mostly Jessica has done a really good job of kind of just like flipping the script and going back to the good old days. And one specific thing that she'll do is the night before a flight, she'll tell the kids a bedtime story about the travel day ahead. And so it's we're going to go on this really amazing airplane, and you're going to have a snack, and you get to pack your backpack with whatever toys you want. And then someone will come around and ask you what drink you want. You can pick orange juice or cranberry juice, whatever you want. And then that plane's going to take us to a new magical place. The difference that you see in the kids and their mood throughout the day, again, instead of it being a difficult travel day, like that's part of the experience. That's part of the journey, is that travel day.
I totally agree. And I think you're completely right that we as adults should also remember that. I mean, I see people in an airport getting annoyed, and you sit there and think for a second, wait a minute, we are on the ground and we are going to get into a metal tube.
Yeah, exactly.
Fly through the air and take us to a place completely different. Like that's a miracle. And we're getting to partake in something extraordinary, and you get to look out your window and stare at clouds. It's
right.
It's just an amazing thing.
So we have this family rule where we don't let our kids be on like iPads or video games or any screens unless they're on an airplane or on like a road trip. Fortunately for them, that's quite often, but that's the rule. Like, hey, wait till you get on an airplane and then you can pull out your screen. But even then, we don't let them turn on their screens till after takeoff. I make them like open up the window and watch, takeoff and landing, because it's such a beautiful, amazing, like miracle.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have. And what are the places that you have not yet been that you're desperate to do as a family?
Well, a lot of our travels now we've just become addicted to seeing wildlife in their natural habitat. We're going to Antarctica for the first time in February. We're so excited for that. The kids are going to miss kind of a lot of school.
How are you going on that trip? Which ship are you going on?
We're going with Lindblad, and it's like a Nat Geo boat. So we did the expedition in the Arctic this summer, and immediately everyone's like, you have to go to Antarctica. So we're so excited about that. That'll be our 7th and final continent to visit. And I know Garrett really wants to see orcas.
I really want to swim with the killer whales in the wild. And then also on the horizon, we're hoping to soon see orangutans, tigers, and pandas. We have quite the wildlife bucket list ahead of us.
That's amazing. So amazing.
What about you? What's your next bucket list trip?
I mean, there's so many places. I haven't been to Alaska. You talk about it. I'm dying to go.
Yeah, I really love it. Have you been to New Zealand?
Yes.
It reminded me a lot of New Zealand.
There's so many times when you like forget, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in America right now. I totally forget. It does feel like a different country, just both from like the beauty, but also there's kind of a quirky, weird culture in Alaska.
Well, in a way, it strikes me a little bit like Antarctica. I was in Antarctica last December, so you guys are in for such an amazing treat. But there's a short window for Antarctica, and there's a short window for Alaska. So it makes it sometimes harder to fit in. And you mentioned the kids will be missing a little bit of school for Antarctica. How have they brought their life on the road into their classroom, do you think? I mean, how do you feel?
The kids' school, it's a private school, but they've done a lovely job of, we were just in Fiji and Tonga for fall break, and we missed a week before. We just kind of try to add on to our like holiday breaks. And the teacher had Dorothy make a presentation. Dorothy wanted to make a movie. So Dorothy was like, the whole time we were gone, she was working on this film that she got to show her class. And she used some of Garrett's footage of like her, with the whales. And then she showed it to the class. I was so grateful that she got to do that. And she was more than happy to, share with her classmates the exciting things that happened.
Yeah, the school's definitely done a good job of being supportive. And then for us, we're constantly like aware of our kids and their needs. And you've experienced it. So when you're traveling and you see how much your kids are learning, there's no like fear on our end. Like their math is great, their reading is great. They're doing so well in school. But then when you see what they're gaining from the travels and that side of education, it's a really cool balanced opportunity that you wish every kid could have the chance to experience.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you have any moments of sort of where your kids were teaching you on the trips, because I mean, you talked about Belize, and I'll never forget when I brought my daughter when she was probably 6 or 7, and we'd spent a week in Belize in the jungle and doing amazing insect tracking. I don't know if you went tarantula fishing in Belize and snorkeling and doing all this cool stuff, but we got to the airport in Belize City and our flight was delayed for hours. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, she's 7. And there was that American mom hat on of like, okay, I've got to feed her. And the only things in this little newsstand, because of course that's like clean and hypoallergenic and, we're away from the hotel, are these crackers or whatever. And I remember her saying, but Mom, look at all those people. They're lining up for something over there. Can we go over there? And there was a food truck with rice and beans. And I was like, yeah, of course we can go over there and have rice and beans. That's so much better than like a bunch of Oreos or a Kind bar. But it was one of those things where I was thinking like, constantly the kids look at things that you sometimes forget. And I just think it's amazing. I'd be curious about some of your moments with your kids.
We had a moment just a little bit ago in Africa. We were leaving Namibia. We were flying out of Namibia. And it was kind of the end of our whole like bush, we had spent 2 months in the bush and we were driving to the city and my son behind me, so cute, starts to cry. And I was like, what's wrong? And he was just like, I'm just really going to miss the animals. And I'm really going to miss like being out like in nature. I mean, this 5-year-old even said that. And I was like, it didn't even like strike me that like we're leaving nature, we're going to the city. And he did not want to go to the city. And I was like, it was really sweet of him to like realize like how grateful he was to have spent the last couple of months out in the wild.
Yeah, it's amazing. Garrett, do you have any moments like that?
For me, it's always been how good the kids are at making friends. You realize like how important just social and just friends are to young kids. And so it's kind of been a sad thing that like there's pros and cons to our lifestyle of traveling so much. And one of the cons definitely is like the consistent time with community and friends. But I would say the silver lining to it, the benefit of it is our kids have such a desire for friends that they can be anywhere in any country with any language barrier. And just within minutes, they've made friends and are playing, whether it's playing soccer, playing at the playground, whatever it is. It's a really beautiful thing to see.
That's amazing. And one of the things I love about your book, Jessica, is that you deal with sort of the inspirational, but you also have a lot of the practical in there. And obviously, a lot of people follow you and think of you guys as having like the dream life that's completely inaccessible. But you talk about budgeting and how you can travel on different budgets. And I'd love you to share some of those kinds of tips or advice.
I mean, I say in the book, I think you can travel on any budget, and it doesn't need to be, a bucket list trip to Africa, but it can be a trip to the closest national park, or it can be, camping in your own backyard. So just whatever you have access to or is going to work for your family is great. Just get out with your family. That's the goal after all, right? But as far as like what specifically you can do to budget, I think the whole credit card, all of that stuff, it's a whole new world. Like I think most, medium income families in the United States, if you use your points and your credit cards and all that wisely, like you can go on a trip almost every year with what you're spending, and then deals. And I always say, like, make sure you check out Black Friday and just all those like little things. Like you really can figure anything out on different budgets if you just take the time to, set your goal and then use your money wisely. And for us, money spent on travel is always money well spent.
Yeah, totally agree. And what about dealing with eating around the world with your kids. I'd be curious, I think a lot of people worry about, how am I going to feed my kids in different places? And are they going to be picky eaters? Or how do I know that the food's going to be safe? What are some of your tips there?
That's been one of the most like beneficial. It's something I love about our kids, and it's thanks to the travel and also just our maybe strictness as parents, is we have a family rule that is kind of like two rules. One is you need to try everything at least once. And so if we're in a country and they put something weird on your plate, everyone needs to try it at least once. If you don't like it, you don't need to finish it, but you need to at least try it once. But then the other rule that we just have it within ourselves is like, we're going to eat whatever the local cuisine is. And so we're not just looking for chicken nuggets, French fries, and pizza wherever we go. It's quite the opposite. That even if that's on the menu, we won't let our kids eat that.
Staff sometimes they'll be like, they'll bring out the kids menu and we're like, no. And most of the time it is just some variation of like chicken and rice or pasta. You know what I mean? Like it's not too crazy.
But because of that, I mean, our kids are very, very adventurous eaters.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what are some of the things that you think people misunderstand about family travel? If you could correct a misconception that you encounter a lot.
Oh, I think there's a lot of them. I think the biggest one that we heard a lot, especially in the very beginning, is that they won't remember it. And
it's a fun thing. It's kind of just a family game we play during our travels that I'll give the kids a quiz. I'll explain an adventure we went on or something an experience we had, and they'll name the country. And it blows my mind how well, even sometimes they'll correct me. I'll think, oh, we did this thing in Morocco. And they'll be like, no, Dad, that was actually in Portugal. Or they'll explain a situation and I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that. Yeah, we did that in Scotland and I haven't remembered that since. Like they have really impressive memories, probably because they've done it at such a young age.
But I also feel like regardless of if they remember like the little details and things that they see and the things that they learn, like most importantly is that we're together as a family and they know that, we can accomplish things together and we can be together. And it doesn't, like when things go wrong or when things go right, like we're experiencing the world together. And there's nothing I'd rather do than see this world with my family.
I would also say major misconception as well is safety, that so many countries that we thought, oh, we're going to a dangerous place, we need to be extra careful. We've been shocked that I think it's been a surprise. Oh, wow, the media is a terrible source for how safe places are or not. And once you arrive there, you're surprised how friendly people are, that just so many amazing families around the world, and that places generally are very safe.
Completely agree with you. And I actually would love to ask you about a couple of examples, just in part because I feel like we can do our own public service announcement by debunking some of these myths.
Totally.
I noticed in the book you have Guatemala, which like for me is one of the most beautiful, interesting countries, full of just kind, amazing people. And so many Americans think Guatemala is a very dangerous place.
I mean, we've been to 4 times to Guatemala. And I mean, I'm yet to ever feel in danger for me or my children. Like
it's just this but and then with that though comes like being a savvy traveler. You're not going to walk in certain areas after a certain time, or you're not going to do things like that. We went to Turkey once and I was so excited to go to Turkey. We were going to Cappadocia, which is, you may be seen on like, with the big hot air balloons that go off every morning. Just incredible. I was so thrilled to be there. We landed in Cappadocia and turn on our phones and immediately have like texts from both our moms being like,
they were both
all over the news. It says for, Westerners to
get out of Turkey.
Yeah, to get out of Turkey. They're clearing out the embassy. Like, you got to leave. And we freaked out. We were so scared.
But we couldn't get on a flight out until the very next day. And so what we kind of decided together was like, you know what, we're here. We're stuck here for the next 24 hours. Let's sleep on it. And if we're feeling nervous in the morning, then for sure we're going to get out of here. But let's not jump to conclusions because the media has steered us wrong many a times before. Now that we're here, let's just feel it out. It ended up being just one of our most wonderful, safe experiences ever.
Especially like Garrett, I don't know if you do this when you travel, but we kind of like rank our places, like where's, the most beautiful, where's the best food, where's the nicest people. And like to us, Turkey is top 3 nicest, most genuine
in the entire world.
In the entire world. Like it was so opposite of what we'd seen in the media. Especially I remember our first day, we were in the capital and we went to the Grand Bazaar and this guy approaches my daughter. He pulls out a balloon and gives it to my kids. And I'm like, this is just crazy how it is just breaking down every stereotype that I've ever thought of about Middle Eastern men.
We were upset with ourselves. We very hardcore judged the book by its cover,
Totally.
thought so wrongfully of him, and then he was just the nicest.
The sweetest people. And they loved kids there. They loved them. Like everybody, men, women, would come up to Manila. He was probably 18 months and they would just want to pinch his cheeks, which I get it. Everybody, that's what, but they loved kids there.
Yeah. No, I have to say, I had not heard of, I love that you have a ranking of like countries of nicest people and best food and things like that. I would say the nicest people on my list of 100+ countries is Iran. And it's exactly like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The absolute opposite of the way the media portrays an entire country.
Yeah, and I'm sure you feel this way
That's what I'm
then,
gonna hear.
the same way we do, because then when you see anything negative against Turkey or against Iran in the news, it hurts, because you know better. And so when you see them just kind of being bullied and labeled in a wrong way, it makes you sad.
Yeah, and to your expression around judging a book by its cover, I mean, I've been to Saudi Arabia a couple of times, and in recent years, people have been like, how could you possibly go to Saudi Arabia? And I always say, like, you wouldn't want America to be judged by
Totally.
one leader
Our politics.
or by one, exactly, by our politics. And so how can you write off a country with millions of people who are just citizens like we are because of politics and the way our media is presenting them?
I'm glad you bring that up because I think that's been a big learning lesson for me. As we've traveled, I feel like when we left in 2015, if somebody asked, where are you from? And we said, oh, we're from America. It was kind of this like, oh, wow, you're from USA. Like, how cool. And then as politics got super crazy and people would ask, where are you from? And they would find out, it was almost like they would laugh and be like, oh, that's the circus over there. How crazy. And it made me really sad and felt very judged. And I'm like, no, like certain things about the country might have changed, but the people, and the goodness of the country has stayed the same. And so it's a shame to be like labeled in that way. But then it just became a learning experience. Like if I feel that way about America, I also need to be slower to judge other countries by how the media portrays them.
Exactly. And I think, as you said, it's like we're all ambassadors of our country. And at the same time, we become ambassadors of the places that we visited. And that those are responsibilities. Now, I know you guys are about to embark on a new chapter with your bucket list studios. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, how the idea came up and what you're planning to do with it.
A lot of it has just been as our kids have been growing up and seeing that we never want to force any sort of like lifestyle or even like level of fame on our kids. We've just wanted to like show them the world, but then let them choose their own path, their own lifestyle. And they're starting to get to that age. And so it was kind of this conversation of, we have this really powerful social media and community around the world. So we don't want to just turn it off, but we want to find a way to like keep the positive message that we've been sharing with the world, keep that going. And so we came up with the idea of creating a family cartoon, an animated TV show, whether, it's something you would see on Disney Plus or Netflix or something, where hopefully if we pull it off correctly, we can continue to share that positive message, but our kids can be as involved or not involved as they want to. And so we're starting to, I think on our YouTube channel, this last week's video was 262. And my plan is to stop when we get to video 300. That to me, my OCD mind is like a good number. I can tie a bow on it and it'll just forever be these 300 videos that we created as our family memories that we'll treasure forever. But then, we can ride off into the sunset and this cartoon can continue onward. That's the hope.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so exciting.
Yeah, we announced it to our audience and, everyone was very excited about it. And so we did this cool thing where we enabled our audience to not like a Kickstarter where they could just like contribute money and get like a t-shirt or something, but we wanted them to have like actual ownership in it. So we invited anyone who was interested to become an investor in Bucket List Studios. And we had just overwhelming amount of like support and excitement come in from our audience to the point where we had to ask them to only limit the amount that they were contributing or investing to $100. And even then, so we ended up taking $10 million from our audience as investment. They have like real ownership in the company. And now it's our job to try to turn this small family startup into hopefully a successful company that everyone who participated or invested in can forever be proud of.
That's amazing. And do you anticipate having the cartoon be based really specifically on your family and their travels? Or is it going to be a little bit more maybe fictional?
Yeah, it'll be loosely based on our like actual experiences and travels. And so the kind of the way we've scripted out as of now is that we, the Bucket List family, will travel from country to country. So each episode will kind of focus on one specific country.
Oh, that's so exciting. So do you think that your kids, if they could sort of put a phrase or an idea around what their biggest takeaway from travel has been, do you know what that would be for each of them?
Oh, what a great question.
Should have asked him this question. I feel like they would say bravery. That's one of the main themes of our family, is stepping outside your comfort zone and trying new things and just being brave.
And sometimes that's something like very courageous and brave, like jumping off a waterfall or getting in the ocean with sharks, something like that. But then there's also the day-to-day, like being brave enough to go talk to a new friend or being brave enough to do the right thing in a difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, like whether the kids when they're 17 or 18, because sadly, my kids are in their 20s now, and there are certain places where I don't know how much my daughter remembers of our Belize vacation, but there's no question to me that she's been shaped by the experiences that she's had. And so I think you're exactly right. Like taking your kids and even I remember when I got my first cat, somebody said, if you take the cat on the plane all the time, they won't be anxious because they just don't know any better. When they're young enough, everything is new, so they don't get afraid of anything new. And I felt that same way about my kids. I was like, if they start traveling enough when they're really young, it's never going to be something that makes them anxious or uncomfortable. And so I think you start to form their lives that way. And certainly by doing things, as you said, that like reinforce bravery is going to make your kids brave, resilient kids.
There's been some beautiful situations when we're at home and it's just kind of a mundane thing as like going to soccer practice or having a big like recital or assembly or something at school, and seeing how they cope with anxiety and stress based on what they've inherited from the travels and then bringing that into their kind of like home life has been beautiful.
That's beautifully said. Thank you so much. It was so great being with you guys.
Oh, it was a privilege. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. We're grateful.
Huge thanks to Jessica and Garrett G for joining me today to talk about the power and joy of family travel. For more on the Bucket List family, follow @thebucketlistfamily on Instagram. And if you're interested in Jessica's new book, head to thebucketliststudios.com for more details.
Here are this week's Indigari Insights.
In our recent Indigari newsletter, we shared 11 incredible summer vacation ideas, as well as an insider's guide to Mykonos, what's new in New York, a sneak peek of the newest Singida Villa in Tanzania, and tips for exploring Palm Springs. So for today's Indigari Insight, I'm assuming you're feeling inspired by the Bucket List family's travel. So I thought I'd call out a few spots from our recent Indigari article highlighting some of the best destinations for families, along with some of my favorites from when I took my kids, who are now past college, on some amazing adventures. So one popular destination is Hawaii. It's full of lush landscapes with plenty of land and water adventures to keep family members of all ages entertained, as well as fantastic hotels like the Four Seasons Resort Hualalai and the newly reopened Rosewood Kona Village, which are two family favorites among our Indigari members and have been for a long time. And if you want to beat the heat, you can head to Montana for a luxurious but authentic and laid-back getaway. I had an amazing mother-daughter stay at the ranch at Rock Creek, whose founder has been a guest on Passport to Everywhere. It's the ultimate Western dude ranch dream come true and has lots of family activities and opportunities to enjoy the great outdoors. If you're looking to travel internationally, some of my top choices for pre-high school kids are Greece and Rome, because it's so easy to tie travel with learning about ancient history in both of those destinations. Venice, too, is like a fairy tale city floating on the water, and it cannot fail to capture kids' imaginations. We have an in-depth guide to all of these destinations on Indigari.com, so you can find family-friendly hotels, restaurants, and activities if you want to plan your adventure. And if you and your family are looking for international outdoor adventures, Costa Rica combines great beach time with thrilling jungle adventures. Some of our favorite resorts, like Andaz, Costa Rica, and the Four Seasons Papagayo, have great kids clubs, family pools, and complimentary activities, including monkey trekking on the property. And for adventurous families with slightly older children, one of my kids' favorite trips ever was to the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, where you can enjoy dune surfing, stargazing, biking on salt flats, and hiking up to natural hot springs. Also in South America, a boat trip around Ecuador's Galapagos Islands is perfect for nature lovers with a knack for adventure, and a great family bonding trip. Lastly, for a combination of countryside and city, I suggest Scotland. Harry Potter fans can check out the J.K. Rowling suite at the Balmoral in Edinburgh and tour the Royal Yacht Britannia before heading to an amazing country hotel like Gleneagles, where there are endless outdoor activities from golf and falconry and orienteering to horseback riding, fishing, archery, and skeet shooting. Again, we've got articles, itineraries, and destination guides to all of these regions on Indagare.com, but I hope these destinations help inspire you on your next family adventure. They're a few of our Indagare favorites and are tried and true by my own kids, most of them, and are sure to be the perfect canvas on which to create lasting memories. For more insider knowledge and family travel tips, head to Indagare.com and be sure that you're signed up for our complimentary weekly newsletter. Thanks so much. Coming up, I'll continue to take you around the world. I'll be speaking with travel writer Pico Iyer about Japan and Condé Nast Traveler's global editorial director Divya Tani about India and world trends, as well as Mary Louise and Roberto Chao about the remarkable Il Pelicano hotels and Italy's greatest summer pleasures. I hope you'll keep joining me each week, and please do rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts so more passionate travelers can discover and join us. Thanks for listening. This has been Passport to Everywhere.
Thank you for joining us at Passport to Everywhere.
We hope you'll join the journey and subscribe. For more travel inspiration, visit Indagare.com. INDAGARE. This has been Passport to Everywhere.